Even today, people talk about the wilderness years or wilderness times. And of course, Jesus has his own wilderness times. And I want to think today about what was going on and crucially, whether Jesus was in control of what was going on. What happens, you read in Mark chapter 1, verse 9, is he is baptized and we have the voice from heaven saying, in you I'm well pleased. And then this extraordinary thing, it says, at once Jesus was thrown, the Spirit threw Jesus into the wilderness. The Spirit threw Jesus into the wilderness. Sometimes translated driven out, but it's actually literally thrown out. So something happens to Jesus which he's not in control of. And this passage, the first chapter of Mark's Gospel, is very extraordinary right up. The most common word is immediately or at once. In Greek, eutheos. Everything's happening immediately. Immediately he's thrown out into the wilderness, and immediately he goes to Galilee, and immediately he calls the disciples, and immediately they follow him, and then immediately after that he heals someone in Capernaum, and immediately the crowds gather, and immediately he goes away, and it's all immediately. And I just want to query a sort of time, think about it in terms of time. I don't think it quite can work like that. At a simple level, we know, immediately he went for 40 days, we know 40 days is a period of time. More the big picture, when Jesus starts his ministry, he's not 18. We don't know exactly how old he was. Luke says he was around 30 when he started his ministry. And later there's a reference in John's Gospel to him saying something particularly wise. And they say, my goodness, he has such wisdom and he's not yet 50. So if you want to push for a more middle-aged Jesus, you can have him in his 40s, because why did they say not yet 50? Luke says he's 30. But to me, the big picture is he's not super young. By the age of 25, Alexander the Great had conquered all of Persia and India. Pitt the Younger had been prime minister. They're just kind of mere humans. Jesus, you might expect him to have just kind of, as soon as he became an adult, started going into ministry, but he didn't for whatever reason. So the time is a long time, and something though gets unlocked at the baptism. Something gets unlocked by the baptism by John. And for me, all the kind of immediatelys are really about momentum. And I think saying once the baptisms happened, the momentum of the beginning of Jesus' ministry was inevitable at that point. That is the key. It's just a sort of inevitability. After this, it's inexorable. It just can't be stopped. It's going to happen. And I feel that's what the kind of all the at once is reflecting. But I also want to reflect on the fact that this sense that Jesus is not quite in control. The Spirit threw him into the wilderness. It's really powerful to me that this happened even to Jesus. You'd have thought the one person who'd be in total control is Jesus. But here the phrase is the Spirit threw him out. And this resonates with me because in life we can to some degree have control, and it's good to kind of set ourselves targets and try to have good habits and live constructive ways with good aims and aim for things. But a lot of life, I think, is reacting to things that have just happened to you, which weren't in your plan. In my life recently, my father had a massive stroke, and that was in no one's plan. He wasn't planning to do this, and he's got his own, recovery thing. But for me, what's changed is the question now is, how can I be a good son now with dad like that? I wasn't something any of us had planned to be in, this situation, but it's happened to us. And that's a tiny example from my own life, but a lot of stuff, happens, and we didn't plan to be here. We've ended up somewhere, and the question then is, what do you do next? And for Jesus, he takes his time. He goes out into the wilderness, something's happened, it's not in his plan. Somehow, even for him, he has to rethink it. So sometimes things happen to you, and taking time to process them is really important. The answer is not going to be obvious. It's not necessarily something you planned. And if that can happen to Jesus, again, goodness me, it can happen to us.